vocabulary. Most of these words I think you've heard before. If you haven't, no big deal. I'm going to start from scratch and give you the definitions, give you an example. So first one is a letter or symbol used to represent a number. And I'm going to do the example before I give you the word. If you think you know the word, don't shout it out. That just ruins the game for everyone. An example could be X. It could be P. It could be M. It could be, ooh, watch this. That's called theta. WTH, what is theta? Theta is a Greek letter, so we don't always have to use our English alphabet letters. We could use symbols, and that's a symbol in math that we use. All of them just represent unknowns. We could use omega. I love omega. What do we call it in math when we have an unknown? Now you can shout out the word. Nope. What's it called? It's called a variable. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
There's a little cartoon that's floating around the web that says, I was fine with math till they introduced letters. Okay? So that's all a letter represents, is just when we don't know something. And how often in math do we not know something? All the time, right? That's why we need algebra. That's why it's so important. The number in front of a variable. So for example, 3x. We're talking about the 3. Negative 2q. We're talking about the negative 2. Negative m. We'd be talking about the negative 1 that we don't happen to see. Anyone remember what that's called? It's a long word, lots of letters. I heard somebody mumble it.
Polynomial.
Good guess, but let's hold that for about 6 examples. Okay, then you say that one. You remember what a number in front of a variable is called? Coefficient. 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 I have no idea. Then you go see a therapist, I think. If there is no coefficient, so for example, we just have x. Well, there actually is a number in front, but we don't need to write it because mathematicians, we assume. If there's nothing in front, we assume that it's an imaginary 1. This one for sure I know you've heard of before. It's a superscript number, indicated repeated multiplication. What does superscript mean? No. It's a bit on the top and it's smaller. So for example, 3 squared. This is a vocabulary word we're talking about. That's a superscript.
Power.
Kind of power. Is there another word? Akil. Exponent. High five to you. Exponent. That is 3 squared. This one you might not have heard before. It's called the multiplication of variables and coefficients. So it's any number of coefficients and variables multiplied together. So an example would be AB squared. All of that together is called this word. It could be negative 3 theta. All of that together could be called this word. It could be 7xy squared z cubed. All of this together is called that word.
Are we ever going to use theta?
Yes. When we take a whole bunch of stuff and we multiply it all together, and so what that means is there's no adding or subtracting in between all those things, it's called a term. A term. So for example, even this 7xy squared z to the 3, even though it has lots of parts, it's still called one term. An expression with one term. So for example, yeah, you need to just zip it to negative 3x. Yeah, hello, hello. Zip it. No. A non-example would be negative 3x plus y. And so I'm going to cross that one out.
This is an operation.
Shh. So negative 3x is an example. Negative 3x plus y is not an example. This is one term because it's all multiplication. This would be two terms because there's an addition in the middle. So what do we call an expression when we has one term? We call it a monomial. A monomial. And I'm going to highlight the prefix, which is mono. Yeah, do you need to come sit somewhere else? Has anyone heard of a monocle?
It's for one eye.
Yeah, a monocle is one of those like one-eye glasses that usually old guys wear, like the Monopoly man. It's called a monocle because it has one lens. This is called a monomial because it has one term.
Are some people like not good vision in one eye?
An expression with two terms would be our negative 3x plus y. It could be a plus b. It could be 7 minus y. It could not be a plus b minus 3. So I'm going to cross that one out. And so for our examples, negative 3x is a term and y is a term. A is a term and b is a term. 7 is a term and y is a term. Why is this one a non-example? So this has 1, 2, 3 terms, and we're looking for an expression with 2 terms. What do you call a vehicle that has 2 wheels? A bike. And what's the long word for bike? Bicycle. What do you think we call an expression with 2 terms?
Binomial.
A binomial.
Is the next one trinomial?
Could you not shout out the answers? Because that's not fun for anyone. Next one, an expression with 3 terms. Well, that could be our a plus b minus 3. That could be x squared plus 5x minus 6. It cannot be negative 4x. A plus b minus 3. That has 3 terms because a is a term, b is a term, and 3 is a term. What are the 3 terms in the second example? X squared is a term, 5x is a term, 6 is a term. Well, why can't this have 3 terms if there's 3 pieces? There's a negative and a 4 and an x. Why not? Because we're multiplying those all together. So how many terms does this have? 1. Okay, what do we call an expression with 3 terms? What do we call a vehicle with 3 wheels? A tri. So it's a trinomial. So we have monomials, binomials, trinomials. Well, then we stopped naming because then it just got ridiculous. So we don't have a specific name for 4 terms or 5 terms or 6 terms or more than that. We just lump everything with more than 3 terms together in the next one, which is just an expression with many terms. And so if the prefix mono means 1, and bi means 2, and tri means 3, and these are all Latin words, by the way, what's the prefix that means many? Yeah, this is your time to shine. Come on. Oh my God, he's not going to say it. Seriously? He just said it for every single word, and now he's not going to say it. Polynomial. Poly is the Latin root for many. Anybody watch Sister Wives? Nobody watches Sister Wives? Oh, such good TV. Well, they're what's called polyamorous because one man has many wives. That's why it's called that, polyamorous. So this whole unit is about polynomials because that's our general word. By polynomials, we mean monomials, binomials, trinomials, more than that, variables, coefficients, all this great stuff. Why do we need to know this? Well, this is heading down to solving equations, and solving equations is the root of mathematics. It's solving for what you don't know, and that's our job as mathematicians, is to find out stuff people don't know. Okay, a number without a variable. 4. No variable attached to that. Negative 13. No variable attached to that. Pi. Ooh, what the heck now? What is pi? What kind of number? What kind of number? We did this last unit. Number 5. It is irrational. But that's a number without a variable. A non-example would be 2x. Why is that a non-example? Because there's a variable attached to it. So we can't just call it a number because that's not specific enough in algebra. Everything is a number. A coefficient could be a number. A polynomial could be a number. So when we have a number without a variable, we call it, anybody remember this from last year? Constant. A constant. What does it mean if something's constant? It means it's not changing. So if you are a constant weight, it means your weight is not changing. If you are a constant height, as I've been since I was 14, it's not going to change. What's the opposite of constant? So what's another word for something that is changing? Variable. Variable means change. So we have variable, which are unknowns, and we have constants, which are just numbers. The highest or largest exponent in a polynomial. Okay, let me give you an example first. X squared plus 5x plus 4. So there's actually lots of vocabulary words that describe this. If I wanted to talk about the number of terms, how many terms does this guy have? Well, the plus and minuses divide terms. So x squared is a term, 5x is a term, 4 is a term. So what would I call this whole thing? A trinomial. That's not what this one is referring to. There's also variables in this. What's the variable? X. Is there a coefficient? What's the coefficient? Coefficient. 5, it's the variable, the number in front of a variable. Is there an exponent? What is it? 2. Is there a constant? What is it? So there's lots of vocabulary words. Specifically what I'm looking for is what is the largest exponent in a polynomial. The largest exponent is 2. It's the largest number that I see that's a superscript. That is called the degree of a polynomial. Let me give you another example. A cubed minus 3b squared plus c to the 7. Again, it's a trinomial. There's coefficients in here, there's variables, there's exponents, not what we mean. When I talk about the degree of a polynomial, what I want to know is what's the largest exponent. So the degree of a polynomial, you look through the exponents, you pick the biggest one. What's the degree of this polynomial? 7. Why 7? Because it's the biggest number. That's the degree of a polynomial, and that's going to become important with something else that we do. Terms that have the exact same variable and exponent. Terms that have the exact same variable and exponent. We want to note, though, the coefficients can be different. We don't care about coefficients so much. We care about variables and exponents. Again, I'll tell you the word in a second. We'll do an example, then a non-example. So an example of this could be 3x squared and negative 7x squared. Do those have the same variable? Do they have the same exponent? Don't care about the coefficient. Another example could be 4a and negative 12a. Do they have the same variable? Do they have the same exponent? Well, do they even have an exponent? Well, sure, we don't see it, but what's the exponent when we don't see it? It's 1, just like the coefficient. Here's a non-example. X cubed and negative 7x squared. There is a non-example. Why? The exponents are different. What do we call it when they have the same variable and exponent? They're called like terms. Like terms. Means they're alike, they're similar. A group of terms with no equal sign. Could be a monomial, could be a binomial, could be a polynomial. We don't care. It's just a group of terms that do not have an equal sign. So 3x minus y. There's a binomial. 4x squared minus pi. Another binomial. minus 7x monomial. So we lump these all together, and yes, they're all called polynomials, and they all have a different name, but they're all lumped together, and these are called expressions. Sometimes you'll hear them called algebraic expressions. And the reason we need that word is to be able to compare it to the next word that's going to come. An expression that equals another expression. So 3x minus y equals 7. Negative 7 equals 21. Without an equal sign, it's called an expression. With an equal sign, I know you've seen these before. We solve them. Equation. So the last two words go together because you need to know if something is an expression or if it's an equation. Whew, how are we doing so far? Roughly how many of these words have you seen before? Almost all of them? Half of them? Visual people, what you might want to do is just box these in highlighter so that the vocabulary words jump out. If you're not visual, it probably doesn't matter to you. Especially on this page when there's a lot going on. Now the reason we're starting with the vocabulary is because these are the words I'm going to use all unit. I'm going to talk about monomials and binomials and like terms and constants and coefficients. And if you don't know what they mean, you're not going to be able to do the question. So that's why we're starting with the vocabulary. We're going to do some examples in a second, and we're also going to do, like I said, this mini project to help you really understand the vocabulary. It's the first thing in the unit you need to understand. Because again, if I say solve an equation and you're like, what's an equation? How can you do the question? Okay, so here's some just examples just to reinforce what the words mean. First one, we're going to state the best vocabulary words. Sometimes there'll be more than one, because sometimes we can call things polynomials, expressions, binomials. We're just trying to find the best one. So number one, what is the arrow pointing to?
4.
The negative 4. Okay, so we're looking in our vocabulary list, something about a number that might be in front of a variable, because it's not the superscript. It has a variable, so what is the vocabulary word for a number in front of a variable? Coefficient. (5xy squared) and negative 6xy squared. Well, the comma between them tells you those are two different terms. Okay. What are we looking for the best vocabulary word? Well, yes, they're both monomials, but they don't need to give us two examples for that. Yes, they're both expressions, probably not what they're looking for. Why would they give us two like that? Well, what do they have that are the same? So what do they have that's the same? Variables and exponents, so the best vocabulary word, like terms. Negative 4x plus 6 equals 9y plus 23. Yes, there's variables in there, there's coefficients, there's constants. What are they probably wanting us with the equal sign in there? What's the best vocabulary word? Equation. And I'm just going to highlight, we picked that one because of the equal sign. Number 4, what's the arrow pointing to? Yes, the little number. What do we call a little number that's at the back of a variable? Exponent. Five is pointing to the 9, and you're always going to mix up coefficient and constant. Because those are the two words, they both start with C, they both mean numbers. You want to think variable or no variable. And if it doesn't have a variable, it means it's not changing. And if something is not changing, it's called constant. (6x minus 7y). Okay, again, it's not pointing to anything specific. It's not equal to anything, so it's probably talking about the number of terms. How many terms are there? Well, what's the first term that you see? 6x is a term. What's the second term? 7y, count the number of terms. 2, what do we call an expression with 2 terms? A binomial. Seven is pointing to the last term, which is the c. What do we call the c? Any letters called a variable. Eight, not pointing to anything specific, so it's probably talking about the number of terms. What's the first term that you see? The second term? And the last term? Count the number of terms. What's an expression with 3 terms? Trinomial. Nine, what the hoo-ha? What is going on here? There's a lot of stuff. There's a whole bunch of variables. There's exponents. There's a coefficient. Is there any arrows pointing to anything? So it's probably talking about the number of terms. How many terms? Even though there's all this stuff, if we're multiplying all of it together, how many terms is there? 1. This is 1 term. So I would accept the word term. What's the other word I would accept? Monomial. Has anyone ever ridden a monorail? We don't have one, but Vancouver has one, Florida has one, lots of cities have them. What's a monorail?
Subway.
Kind of. It's usually in the air, but it's some kind of transportation system. And how many rails does it have under it? 1. So a normal train has 2 rails, a monorail has 1. That's why it's called a monorail. Okay, what the hoo-ha's going here? So there's no arrows pointing to anything, so let's start counting the terms. What is the first term? What's the next term? What's the next term? And then? And then? Okay, so count it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't have a word for 5. We only have up to 3. What do we do when we don't have a word for 5? It's a polynomial. There's another word I would accept as well. So what else could we call this? It's an expression because there's no equal sign. I would accept either of those. Again, you need to learn the vocabulary because if you don't know what these are, you're not going to be able to do the questions because these are the words I'm going to be using the next 3 units. Second thing we need to do is for each of the polynomials below, identify the number of terms, its degree, and its vocabulary word. So what is its name? And these are just 3 separate questions. So number of terms, the degree, and its name. So easy way to get the number of terms is to circle just like we did above. What's the first term you see? So what's the first group of things that are all smushed together? 4xy. What's the second term? 3. How many terms? 2. I'm going to jump right to the name. 2 terms mean we call it a binomial. What does degree mean? The highest exponent. Now it's a little bit tricky here because sometimes you don't see all the exponents. What I like to do is write them in when we don't see them. We don't see anything, any superscript on the x, but there's an exponent there. What does it mean? 1. And we don't see anything on the y, but what do we see? It's also a 1. And to get the degree for any particular term, we add the exponents together. So for the first term, the degree is 2. So even though we don't see a 2, we need to start to understand it's a second degree term. The 3, does it have a variable? No, so the degree of the 3 is 0 because it doesn't have a variable. So constants always have a degree of 0. To get the degree of the whole question, you just pick the highest one. What's bigger, 2 or 0? So we call this a second degree polynomial. So to get the degree, we add the exponents of each term. And I'm going to repeat that in case you're a wordy person, you want to write that down. To get the degree, we add the exponents of each term. Okay, B. X squared is a term. What's the next term? 2xy. Is there another term? What is it? 3y. How many terms? What's its name? Okay, now we need to get the degree. The first term, what's the degree that you see? Degree is the exponent, so it's a 2. Okay, we got to fill in exponents when we don't see them. So we know there's a 1 on the x and a 1 on the y. We add them together, which means the degree of the second term is 2. The third term, we need to put the little 1 on the y. So the degree of the third term is 1. All you do to get the degree of the whole thing is pick the biggest number. Which is the biggest number? 2. Doesn't matter if it's the first 2 or the second 2. It means this is a second degree polynomial. 4. You learned 4 when you were about 2. Who knew it had all these words attached to it? Number of terms. 1, because it's all we see. It's just a 4. So what's its name? Monomial. The degree. Well, if it doesn't have a variable, I already told you in part A, what's the degree of anything that doesn't have a variable? It's 0. It's called a 0-degree polynomial. Show me your thumb. This is going okay. I'm getting these. I don't know. Okay. Here's your third question. So this is an open-ended question. So this could be a 2-point question on a test, and this is one where you make up the answer. So give 2 different polynomials. They each have to have 2 terms, 2 variables, 1 constant, degree of 3. I'm going to do the first one, and then you'll turn and talk to someone and do the second one. 2 terms. So what I like to do is put blanks, just to bring my head that there needs to have 2 things that I'm filling in. There needs to be either a plus or minus between them, completely up to you. I'm going to pick a minus, because why not? I like minuses. There has to be 2 variables. I can have different variables in different terms. I can put them together in one term. We can do whatever we want. I'm going to pick A, and I'm going to pick X, because that spells X. I don't know. Okay, one has to be a constant. Well, now what? If I've already used my 2 spots, can I have room for a constant? So what did it tell me about the 2 variables? They had to be together, so let's move it over. So what that does is frees up a spot for a constant. Give me your favorite number. 9. Has to have a degree of 3. That means one of the terms, the highest exponent, has to be 3 or has to add together to be 3. I have lots of choices here. What do I need here in order for these to be 3? Well, one can be 2 and one can be 1. Which one would you like to be squared? Okay. Is that our only choice? No, there's a million choices for this. Turn and talk and write down a second one that has the exact same criteria. Tyler? Why? We're just doing vocabulary. Okay, so do the examples help better? Like, are you more of an example person? So maybe you want to highlight the examples then? No, we still have 20 minutes. Can you wait till we finish this? If you have to go, go. Turn and talk. Give me a second example.